the Bullcast Podcast. I'm Katie Pickler, and with me today is my co-host, Court Winsett.
Hello!
We are so excited to have you guys back for episode 5. We are talking about building a budget.
And Katie, there's the opening bell. First of all, a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, you have entered the no jargon zone. That means that we are promising you that we are not going to use words that would be, commonly used in our industry, but that nobody outside of our industry knows. We're going to err on the side of caution, so we may define some words that you're like, I know that word, don't treat me like an idiot. We're not treating you like an idiot. We're just, we want to make sure that everybody is clear. We want to make sure that we don't violate our own no jargon zone.
We just want to make sure everyone understands it all. So, but inclusive.
Right, exactly. Okay, so let's assume, ladies and gentlemen, that our episode 4 worked and that you are convinced that you need to create a budget.
Yes.
This episode is the how-to. This episode is going to cover how you create a budget. And it really is going to incorporate a whole lot of the information that we covered in the first 3 episodes. Or, the episode 2, 3, and 4.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get into all that, let's get into our top 5.
Right, okay. So, top 5 this week, because we're doing how to do a budget, and because in our experience, everybody, I don't know if I want to say everybody. Let's just go with this. Because we're doing how to create a budget, we're going to work off of the assumption that everybody's afraid to do their first budget. And based on that, we want to do top 5 things that we're each afraid of more than we fear a budget.
Okay, so top 5 things that I'm scared of more than doing a budget. First one would have to be snakes. Why'd it have to be snakes? I mean, just they're terrifying. I think I have nightmares now to this day. I don't know why. I worry when I go somewhere and sit down on the toilet that a snake's going to crawl through the toilet and bite me.
Where have you been living that you got snakes coming out the toilet?
Nowhere, but it's just it's a phobia. So that's a big one.
Indiana.
Yes, Indiana.
I'm going to start calling you Indiana.
Number 2 would be driving in heavy rainstorms when it's that you can barely see in front of you. You have to have your flashers on. Hydroplaning.
Surely there's a song I can reference here, but I can't think of it.
I don't know. I do not want to
driving in my car.
So yeah, terrified, instantly starts raining and I just start getting phobia really bad. Number 3, big purchases, especially right now during our crazy times we're in with this pandemic. I mentioned on the last one that I did just purchase a new home, and that's scary in its own, but put on top of what's going on right now and uncertainties in the world, extra terrifying. So before I do any major purchases, I'm very scared and, then have buyer's remorse and then panic that, did I budget properly for this? Number 4, I'm a control freak.
No.
It goes along with, I love planning, with, financial advising, with event planning, all of that. So if I can't be planning something or being in control, I think I really start getting the attitude that I'm going to be sitting in a corner rocking back and forth and you've got to send me somewhere because I do not do well not having some kind of control. Yeah, it's a real problem. And my last one would be being in an airplane while a crazy storm is going on. There's so many movies about snakes on planes. Oh yeah, that'd be a whole other thing. We're not doing that one.
I'm tired of these snakes on this plane.
Yeah, bleep, bleep, bleep. But I think you were telling me when I was talking about the Twilight Zone.
There's a Twilight Zone. I think it's in an original episode of the original series, and then they also redid it in the Twilight Zone movie in the 80s, I think. It had John Lithgow was a passenger on a plane in the movie version, and it's storming and he's scared of flying anyway, and he looks out the window and there's a monster on the wing tearing at the engine and he freaks out. And it just.
See, I wouldn't forget about a monster looking out. I mean, I like kind of spooky things, but it was just storming, and I'm scared I'd get struck by lightning and the plane just crashes. Then yeah, that's a whole other thing.
I've never in my life flown on a plane that actually flew in a storm, though. So
I don't know. I mean, it could
happen. Dreams
happen.
of these things.
Yeah, it's along with the snakes in the toilet. I don't know.
That is
okay.
Weird.
But enough about mine. Let's do your top 5.
Yeah, well, mine are obviously far more normal than yours are. Scared of planes and trains and automobiles. My top 5. My number 1 is spiders, obviously. Who cares about snakes when there are spiders in the world? Spiders are terrible.
Except for Charlotte.
Oh, okay. Maybe Charlotte. But I'll tell you what, one time I went and saw a movie called Arachnophobia with my wife, and she laughed until she was crying at me.
Yeah, I think that was a funny one.
Yeah, she thought it was a hilarious movie, and I was sitting next to her terrified. I hate spiders. They are terrible. You want to talk about sitting down somewhere and, not knowing if something is there? You can hear a snake. You can't hear a spider. It can sneak up on you, crawl up on your back of your leg, and bite you before you even know it's there. And then all of a sudden, you've got a big giant hole in your leg. And anyway, spiders are terrible.
Okay.
Number 2, ghosts. But not ghosts. Not
like Casper?
Not the friendly ghosts. I'm talking more like the poltergeisty type ghosts. The ones that get mad at you when you build a house on their burial ground. Those things freak me out.
Do you have some experience with that?
I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to anger
touchy subject?
The ghosts.
Okay.
But let's just say that I have reasons to fear ghosts.
If there's any ghosts listening, we support you. We love ghost listeners. Yep, thanks.
Yes, absolutely. Guys, I don't have a problem with you if you don't have a problem with me. No reason for us to get touchy.
Come talk to me. I like ghosts.
Number 3. Aliens. I'm scared of aliens. On a very scientific level, I'm really scared of aliens. Like, if there is an alien out there that has the technology to find us and come to our planet, then they probably got the technology to really, mess things up for us.
But you just need glasses of water laying around. Isn't that what they did in Signs?
Signs,
you take the bat and just swing.
Then on the other hand, there's the aliens in V that it didn't matter. They were looking for water and they wanted us as food. So, and then, let's not even get into the xenomorphs in Aliens. Those things were freaky.
That's right. Well, now, Mars Attacks aliens. I'd be cool with that. They were kind of cool. And then they hated the One Country song and their heads exploded.
Well... Okay, I'll give it to you for most of the aliens in Men in Black. They seem mostly nice. Yeah. I'll give it to you for an alien like E.T. But real aliens, somebody that could find us out in this huge universe of a universe and actually have the technology to get here, I don't think they're coming here for any good reason, and I don't want to meet them.
Okay.
Number 4, I am scared of Australia.
I love Australia.
Australia is an island of death. It is the devil's backyard. The only reason that you go there is to get bitten by the aforementioned horrible spiders and the snakes and the dingoes. There's nothing good that comes out of Australia. Nothing against...
My best friend's in Australia, actually. But I did go visit her, and her house spider that was in the car with me that I freaked out was about a $50 size. It was ginormous. So yeah, don't go.
No. Nothing against any Australians, nothing against the lovely culture, nothing against any of that. But you got to get rid of your pest problem before I'm going to come visit you. That's all I'm saying. And then finally, I am deathly afraid of hospitals. Okay, well, no, not really so much hospitals. That's not true. I go to hospitals. I'm deathly afraid of waking up in a hospital and not knowing why I'm there. Okay, no, that's not really true either. I'm deathly afraid of waking up in a hospital, not knowing why I'm there, the hospital being empty, me wandering around in the hallways, and then all of a sudden being attacked by zombies. Yes, I'm deathly afraid. Okay, so let's just take all of that. I'm deathly afraid of zombies. Okay, unless I have like a bow and arrow or something that I could shoot the zombies with. But, just zombies. Zombies in general are bad. Have you ever seen Walking Dead?
Thanks for calling me out. No.
It's another show that she's never seen, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, well, anyway.
Yes. Tell me on why I should see it and our comments and questions.
That's my top 5. Katie, let's move on to, I guess we should move on to our topic.
Yeah. So, again, we're really wanting to talk about build a budget. And as Court mentioned before, we hope we sold you in the last episode on why it's important to build a budget, because it really, you don't want to wait till it's too late and you need it. Everyone needs to have a budget. And I kind of polled some people and said when they first hear the word budget, most people instantly go, oh, scary, or they think cuts. And it's not always about cuts. And that's what we really want to dive into this episode and explain, building your budget. And, you know, it may seem like a crazy program, but really it's kind of 4 steps.
4 steps.
Yeah. It's easy as 4 steps.
Like a 4-step program.
Yeah, not 12-step program, 4-step.
Okay. Okay. So we got 4 steps to build a budget. What would those 4 steps be? Well, let's back up for a second. We kind of jumped there.
Okay. Keep us on task.
Let's talk about a budget for a second. I mean, not that it's necessarily jargon. Most people know what you mean when you say budget, but you know, what for instance, are we talking about an annual budget or a monthly budget or a weekly budget? What what are the differences?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about a little bit of all of that on this, but what we're talking about for this purpose is your personal budget. This is not your business, but this is just for us talking about you as a person, you as a family. We're going through the basic of a personal budget. Right.
So we're not talking about sitting around a conference table with a bunch of staffers at an office and deciding a budget for your upcoming business year, or anything like that. We're talking about at most probably sitting down with a spouse or an SO, significant other, and coming up with how you as a family are going to operate over the course of the next 12 months or so. So for that purpose, really there is value in coming up with 2 different budgets. Your overall annual budget, which is really sort of your broad 30,000 foot view of your life over the course of the next year, your financial life over the course of the next year. And then also after developing that overall annual budget, developing your monthly budget as well, using that annual budget to develop your monthly budget as well. So we're really talking about doing 2 things. It's sort of the two elements that form one. It's kind of like I don't know, maybe like Voltron or Power Rangers or something like that. We're going to take all these parts and we're going to fit them together into one awesome fighting machine of a budget. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah. And remember, again, when we're going through this, your budget is an expression of your values and what's important to you, and making sure that the reason you create a budget is so you have control. You know what money's coming in, what money's going out, and you feel like you know where that's all going and you have control of what's being spent.
And you will be able to use that to help you make decisions, purchasing decisions, financial decisions, living decisions over the course of, say, a year, right? Okay.
Yeah, and the reason to do it is for the now, but it's also for the future. And we mentioned on the last one about how it's important to what you do now can affect when you retire, your kids going to college, being able to afford different major purchases later in life. So that's why even if you feel like you're doing great now, it's still important to have a budget.
Budget will help your life. It will help your marriage.
Absolutely.
It will help everything if you do it right and then use it correctly. So that kind of does bring us to our 4 steps. Yes. Doing it right. How do we do it right, Katie?
So 4 steps, and we're just going to keep telling you guys throughout this and explain it all, but 4 steps. Identify, verify, apply, and live it. And that's really the most important one. You got to live it.
We're living the lifestyle here.
Living the life, living the budget. But it doesn't have to consume you. Y'all remember last time, Court talked about the whole visual of being in a pool. A budget doesn't weigh you down and sink you to the bottom. It's like the floaties. You put them on and it's going to hold you up and be that. It's that support bra. It supports you.
Oh, my Lanta.
It's that good old support. Girls, you know what I'm talking about.
I don't care. That analogy is going to hold up forever. It's like floaties and a support bra. Some people, just whatever works for you. So what exactly are we identifying? We're identifying 2 basic broad categories. First, we're going to identify your income. We talked about that in a podcast episode 2. We're going to identify all of our sources of income, every single source of income that you have over the course of a year. And then we're going to identify your expenses. We're going to identify all of your expenses over the course of a year. We're talking about your when we talk about your income, we're talking about the type of income you have, the
nature of the income.
Yeah, and how often it comes in. Mm-hmm. If it comes in more than once, say a year, how often does it come in? All of those things are important. And when we talk about your expenses, we're talking about, again, how often do you have those expenses and what type of expense is it? And that would be your required versus non-required, or to use the actual jargon word, it would be
jargon.
Yeah, jargon. We're in the no jargon zone, but I am not committing an offense because I'm going to explain myself.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Explain it to me, Lucy.
Okay, so we have expenses, either non-required or required. Well, non-required would be what we call discretionary. We've mentioned that before. That is a jargon term. And then required would be those mandatory expenses. Your needs versus your wants. Your mandatory/required is your needs. Your discretionary/non-required, that's your wants. That's how we're going to break it down. So what do? Well, we do have some actual added content for you.
Yes, we do.
When this episode airs, you will be able to go to our website and go to the resources tab. If you go to the resources tab, you'll be able to find, we're going to have 4 different forms for you that will go along with this episode. The annual budget form, the monthly budget form, your income checklist, and your expense checklist. You'll be able to go down, for instance, the income checklist and be able to, we're going to have just all sorts of different kinds of incomes listed on there, and you'll be able to check off, yes, I've got that. And then if you do have that type of income, you'll be able to write in how much it is, how often you get it, and whether or not it's
fixed or variable.
Fixed or variable. Katie, you just entered.
Oh, sorry.
That was a jargon violation. You didn't explain yourself before you said fixed or variable.
Shame
fixed
on me.
Would mean something that
fixed is where it's going to be the same amount constantly. It does not change every single time. It's the same. And then variable is where it fluctuates. It changes up depending on what you're getting paid for.
Okay, that's easy enough. So you'll be able to use, hopefully, those documents. Again, we'll go into the annual budget and the monthly budget documents in just a minute. But starting off with those checklists, starting off with that income checklist and that expense checklist, let's discuss identifying your incomes.
Yeah. So let's talk about income. What we want you to do is, utilize this checklist when you have time. Just look at it and see what is your income? How is it coming in? Is it those wages, those bonuses, investment income, Social Security, pension, alimony, child support, gifts, inheritance? We even have information in there. If you get an annual gift from your aunt, put it in there. But what we want you to do is, have this document and look across and see, okay, I am a salary employee. So I've got this. I'm going to mark that I get it 2 times a month and it's the same amount. So that's same amount means fixed. And, there's your first one. Now, say if you have a side gig, and I think we put that as like hobby income on there, I believe. So say you have a side gig and Court's already looking at me. You're making cornhole boards.
No, good Lord.
So if you make cornhole boards, you may put on there an estimate of, you probably make about $200. I don't know what it may be. You put an estimate on there. So that's variable because it fluctuates. And you put about how much time period. So that's really kind of a basic for you to look at this and understand the nature of your income, how it's coming in, because we're going to really look back at that sheet of the income as we move forward to annual and monthly budget.
Yeah, okay, because you are going to want to be able to total up how much you make in income on an annual basis. You're going to want to have a good idea of what your total monthly income is as well.
And the reason you're going to want that, and I'm about to put myself in the spot again, is because of cash flow.
Cash flow, jargon. That's 2 jargon violations.
I know, slap me on the wrist.
Oh, man.
But cash flow, Court, help me out with it, helping explain cash flow.
Okay. Well, cash flow is both simple and it's a simple concept, but it's sort of difficult to explain without really getting sort of mixed up and tongue-tied. So I tried to come up with sort of a basic example. Let's say on January 1, you start off the year and you have $0.00 and you have no car.
Whoops.
And you have a job. You've just been hired to work a job. And that job is going to pay you $70,000 a year. And it's going to pay you $70,000 a year. It's going to pay you twice a month over the course of 12 months. So over the course of 12 months, you'll receive a total of $70,000. But you're in January right now. You need a car to do this job. You don't have a car. You want to buy a car, but you want to pay cash for it. You can't pay $30,000 cash for a car right now based on the fact that you've got $70,000 salary, because even though you know you're going to make $70,000 over the course of the year, you don't have $70,000 right now. So your income for the year will be $70,000, but right now your cash flow is actually, if we're starting at January 1, your cash flow right now is zero.
Yeah.
The first time you're going to receive cash, the first time you're going to have any money coming in is probably on the 15th of the month if they pay you twice a month. So January 15th, your cash flow will be, I don't know what, $2,000, a little over $2,000 after taxes, something like that. So that's the first cash you're going to see.
Yeah.
So when you're budgeting, you have to take into consideration not just what your income is going to be, but also when you're going to get it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm visualizing here. It's kind of like, the water hose. Like you're turning the water hose, you're getting that money coming out, and then it turns off. You need to understand when you have these purchases and stuff like that, what money you have available at that moment. And that's what cash flow really is when is the money coming in, what is available when. Because if you get paid, 2 times a year, okay, you know when that money's coming in. Or if you get paid twice a week, or if it's variable of when you get paid, you need to understand that. And so that's what we're trying to break down, of really understanding not just how much you're making totally, but when it's coming in, when you can expect it, because that plays all into when those funds are available to spend and how to budget.
So you are going through and making this list of all of your incomes, when you are going to receive that income, how frequently, is it once a month? Is it quarterly? Is it annually? And then you're going to have that list, which means you're going to have a total. You're going to set that to the side for now. You're also going to come up with a list of expenses. Again, worksheet, resources tab on our website. There's an expenses worksheet, expense checklist. You can go down that checklist and be like, I don't know that we could possibly list every single expense that someone might have, but we're going to list the big ones.
Yes.
And you're going to be able to go down that checklist and match up, yes, I have this expense. This is how much it is. I have to pay it this frequently. Or I have this expense. It's only once a year. You're going to mark all of that down on your checklist.
Well, and what we're hoping the expense list does is help kind of trigger. Remember we were talking about expenses a couple episodes ago, and you really utilize your credit card statements. You utilize all these different outlets to see where your money's going. And so
you're getting ahead of yourself there, because that's actually step 2. We're gonna get into
jumping
that.
Ahead.
We're still in step 1 right now. We just want to identify generally those expenses that you have, and then in step 2 we'll really get into the nitty-gritty of how we're going to verify those expenses. That would be the So
getting back on it. So expenses for right now, you really are just listing out that while, I think that, carnivore nutrition spot loaded tea is mandatory in my mind, it really is just a discretionary expense. And that my, storage for Dropbox, while it feels essential to me that I keep all my stuff saved, that is a discretionary expense. And our mandatory ones are
Netflix, obviously. Netflix.
Mandatory would be your bills, your water, your rent.
Mortgage or rent. Groceries, at least to a certain level. Your groceries are going to be mandatory. You've got to eat something.
Insurance.
Insurance. Clothing. Another big one. Can't walk around naked.
Yeah, basic clothing. Now, if you're trying to get all crazy designer stuff, that may be more discretionary.
Louis Vuitton.
But with this, it's same with income. We want you to look at your expenses, figure out, categorize them. Are they mandatory? Are they discretionary? So again, another way, is it required? non-required. And
do you
then
need it or do you want
do
it?
you need it or want it? And, understand, yes, we know we all need it, even though it may just be a want. And then from there, break down, is it a fixed or is it a variable? So like a Netflix is a fixed,
well,
non-required.
Yes and no. I mean, it is fixed for now. It is what it is. It is what they say it is this month, every month. But then next month, they're going to go up on their rate again.
Yeah.
So,
and like a variable discretion would be if you, want to add an allowance in there for, you going out to eat or going to the movies, that would then be a non-required or discretionary variable expense.
Right. So you're going to list all of these things on the checklist. Again, we're going to go through the same sort of exercise where you're going to identify the expense, identify whether it's mandatory or discretionary, and identify whether it is fixed or variable, and you're going to have all of those listed out. I mean, I'll give you the broad categories. You've got shelter, you've got food, clothing, transportation is a big one.
Oh, yeah.
You can't get to a job and earn money without some sort of transportation. And if you have transportation, you're going to have to do some sort of maintenance on that transportation.
Unless Long Duck Dong took your automobile.
And then, you've got your insurance and health care needs and so forth. And then also your legal requirements. And by legal requirements, I mean the stuff that the government requires you to pay, which is things
Uncle
like
Sam.
taxes and so forth. So you've got all of those expenses, and a lot of those can be mandatory to a level, and then they can also be discretionary to a level. Because, for instance, like you said, clothes, you have to have clothes, but you don't necessarily have to Gucci. You don't have to wear Gucci. You have to have food, but you can buy bologna or ham or turkey and some bread and make a sandwich. You don't have to have steak for every meal. So,
right.
I'm just saying. But haircuts, probably grooming, depending on your employment, you probably need to be somewhat well groomed. You might be able to learn how to cut your own hair. But so it might be mandatory that you do it to a certain extent, but is it mandatory that you go somewhere and spend $200 on your hair? Charitable donations.
See, and that goes back to where we talked about a budget is your value. And so if it is, this is where you're honest when you're identifying your expenses. Be honest about what you're spending the money on. And so if you are someone who is I hate to use the term sucker, but when you see your friends post that your kid's going on a mission trip and, needs donations, buy this t-shirt or buy this Boy Scout popcorn or buy, Girl Scout cookies, whatever it may be, put that in your budget. Now, list it as charity. It's not cookies and it's not popcorn. It's charity. Right. But seriously, make your mama proud. Put in the budget to give to church.
Yes. Otherwise known as tithing.
Yeah.
So you've got those sorts of things, the personal things like your haircuts, your gifts, your charitable donations. You've got entertainment. That's pretty much always going to be discretionary, again, unless you're talking about Netflix. And I'm pretty sure everybody agrees at this point that Netflix is mandatory.
Yes.
But entertainment, things like books, movies, vacations, spas, a whole lot of stuff falls under entertainment and that sort of discretionary expense. Household. Okay, so there are certain things that you have to have for your household to keep it clean and to keep it, keep it without holes in its roof and so forth. But other things for your household, like for instance, you don't necessarily need domestic help. It might be that some people really feel like they do need it, but it is a discretionary expense, paying that other person to come and help you clean your house or to help you mow your lawn or whatever.
Toilet paper is necessity.
Toilet paper is a necessity, absolutely.
But having a bidet put in your house, that might be discretionary.
And then, transportation, back again, sort of a discretionary expense would be you have to have some sort of transportation, but you don't necessarily have to have the Lamborghini or even
but if you have one, come by the office so we can see it.
And if you do have a car, you don't necessarily have to spend a whole lot of money on a monthly basis tricking that car out, unless you plan on competing in the next Fast and Furious race.
And then you'd be getting more income.
Maybe.
If you win, maybe.
Possibly.
But so these are identifying. It's those two important documents of your income checklist, your expenses checklist. And we hope when you break this down, you have a clear view of the nature of both of these, what they are, how much is coming in, fixed or variable, and, the time they're coming in as well. So you really understand your cash flow and where your money's going.
Yeah. And so once you've done that, we've spent all this time, and basically all we've talked about so far is just identifying those two things, identifying your income and identifying your expenses. But you have to have that starting place, and you've got to have it written down, which is why we've provided you those checklists. Once you have it written down, then you can go on to, you sort of jumped to this a little earlier, you can go on to verify.
Yeah, step two
is that verify. And that's when you're going to gather together, say, 3 months worth of your bank statements and your credit card statements, any way that you can check and see what income came into your bank, or what how, like for instance, if you use your debit card to buy things, or if you actually still pay for things with checks, or if you use a credit card, then you can look back at those things and identify exactly where that money went and how much you spent, and how much of that money went to discretionary items versus how much of it went to mandatory items.
And I will tell you, from doing a lot of these, a lot of the credit card companies have really jumped on board with this. Now, whether it's right or wrong, if you pull a report, it'll show your expenses, and it'll kind of already pre-categorize things of how much you've spent on food and entertainment and travel and all of that. So it kind of helps you, but you will, when you go through this and you really verify your data and you see all your expenses, there will be something that you have missed. I was guilty of forgetting about those little bitty charges of the Dropbox subscription or the Apple storage or whatever it may be. And while that on your bill each month is, a couple bucks, maybe $10, something like that, you combine all that together and you're talking about, $50 each month, and, times 12, that adds up. And so that's where really the verifying comes in, because we think about where our money's going and we forget about a lot of the little things, and every penny counts.
There is a saying, someone said at some point, it's an expression, I've heard it many times, and I'm sure it came from someone originally, I do not know who, and feel free to interject if you do know who said it first. Trust but verify. So when you're coming up with the identify part, when you're listing up all of those expenses, you trust yourself. You know your life, you know what you spend things on, but then verify, because there's gonna be stuff that you missed, and you may miss on some of the amounts too. And the verification process can be really helpful in terms of actually really nailing down those amounts. Because, for instance, I think to myself, okay, I spend $100 a week at the grocery store, but then I look back on my bank statement, and my debit card says that I'm spending closer to $150 a week. But then there may be 1 week where I spent $100 and another week where I spent $250. So I can take all of those weekly expenditures and average them up to how much did I actually spend on average over the course of, say, a 3-month period. And that gives me something that I can use as this is my grocery bill monthly average. And you're going to use something closer to that average, or either the average or the highest amount when you're going through and doing your expenses. You're not going to use your lowest estimate. I say 100, and then it turns out it's 150 on average, but I may spend as much as 200. I can't just budget for 100.
No, that's what I tend to always, when you said higher, I tend to go on the higher route because, for example, electric, that bill is a great example. That and water fluctuates every single month. And so what I like to do is kind of, granted, if you're in a new situation, you can't really do this as much, but I like to try and find the highest it's ever been, build in a little cushion. So say like the highest it would be is 150. I may budget 200 and put that, $200 is going to be, it's a variable expense, but $200 is what I'm estimating for electricity. And I then know in the back of my head, when, all is said and done with this lovely budget, that I have taken expenses like that and I have rounded up So I've built in cushions in there. So then the end number shows that there is a safety net built into that.
Yeah. I generally speaking, when I'm budgeting, I take a little different approach. I'm going to probably throw out the most that I spent over, say, a 12-month period at the grocery store, because that might include like a trip to the grocery store for Thanksgiving or something ridiculous like that. So I'm going to throw out those highest numbers, but I'm also probably not going to use the lowest number. I'm going to use something that's closer to what I feel like is the average, plus add a little bit on, mainly because, I tend to have a problem when I'm budgeting of saying, oh, well, I've got that cushion in there. So,
And that's honesty. That's where you have to know yourself and know that, I like having the cushion, but Court's saying that, he wants to do kind of the middle, which is...
I know myself.
Yeah,
and I know that if I have that cushion, that I'm going to tend to spend toward that cushion rather than spending toward what I need to actually budget for.
And with that also, so we're talking about with expenses, kind of finding that middle or, rounding up with income. If you've got some of those variable incomes coming in, then you need to really look at that. Don't put the highest you ever made.
Right.
Because, that's probably not going to be, it's not going to be a good look of how your money coming in is.
Right. No, yeah, you variable income. The best example that I can think of is again what I call gig work, which includes hobbies, anything like that, but also includes literal gigs. Something like a musician or something like that. I think we've talked about that during episode 2. That work where you're going to get paid by. For a gig at a bar where you get paid for the heads that walk through the door, or are you going to get paid a single amount for a gig at a wedding or something like that? And depending on how you're paid for that gig, you may make $5,000 if you're a band that can demand $5,000 or $10,000 for a wedding, or you may just work at a bar and make $500 for the night. But chances are unless you just know we charge $10,000 per gig that we play, no matter what, you don't want to use $10,000 as your budget number for the amount that you're going to have in income. You're going to want to use, okay, how many gigs do I average on a yearly basis? How many gigs do I average on a monthly basis? And what is the average amount that I make towards those gigs? And then, like you were saying, probably want to round down a little bit. Probably want to estimate a little bit lower, because we tend to recommend that you be conservative.
Yes.
And so you're gonna estimate low on what your income is. You're gonna estimate high on what your expenses are. So that you're sort of conservative and you're not just shooting for the moon.
Yeah, you don't want to rely on, if you put numbers in there, that you're going to make this much, but that was just a fluke month where you were, say, commissioned and you sold 5 billion things and made so much money, but at the end of the day, that's not reality.
Right,
that's why we're trying to make this honest so you get the best numbers, and that at the end of it, when this budget's complete, it is that comfort level that it's not outlandish, and it's based off of you repeating your work that you did in March. It's not going to be based off of that. It's going to be based off of average of what you've been bringing in, average of what you've been spending.
Right. Okay. So to bring it back around to our verify, because again, we want to make clear we're talking about 4 steps, and right now we're just on step 2. You've gone through and you've identified all of those things that you've spent money on by looking at your statements, your credit card statements, your bank statements, and so forth. You're also going to be able to verify what that income is. Hopefully, sometimes if you get paid by cash a lot, you may need to. This process of identifying your income may take a little while, because you may have to take a few weeks to monitor how much cash you're bringing in and actually count it and keep track of it for a few weeks to a few months so that you know that exact number. It's all about verifying that exact number, because if you're dealing in a lot of cash, whether it's because you take money out at the ATM or because you get paid tips in cash at a restaurant job, you've got to keep track of how you're spending that money that you take out from the ATM, or how much money you're bringing in from those tips. So don't just rush through this. Don't just go, okay, day 1, well, it's this much, and then move on. Take the time to really verify how much cash you're bringing in on a monthly basis or on over the course of a couple of months, so that you can determine what that annual amount is going to be, so that you'll end up with numbers that you can add up for an entire year.
Yes.
That are your total numbers for your income, your total numbers for your expenses. And what are we shooting for here? Income compared to expenses. Income should be at least equal to, if not more than, your expenses. If you're starting off from a place where your income is less than your expenses, then you're already starting off in trouble.
You want to break even? I did it again. I'm sorry. I did it again.
This is your third jargon violation.
3 strikes, I'm out of here. Is that what it is?
Get out. I'm putting Cameron in your spot.
Oh, gosh. Guys, sorry. It's been a great ride. 5 episodes. I'm out. No, but just reiterating what Court was saying, you want to make sure it breaks even. And break even meaning that you're balanced in it. That you don't have more expenses than income coming in. You want to make sure at the end of the day it all works out. That you've got enough money to pay for what you're doing.
So basically, effectively, you hear the term break even in business terms. That would be when does there's usually a point in the year when a business actually has had enough, or let's go with a retail sales business, has had enough sales that they actually have sold enough, that they have enough money that's come in that they are going to be able to cover their expenses for the year. That would be their break-even point. When they've actually reached that point, they've made enough to cover all of their expenses. Side note, Katie, you like shopping, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So what's the biggest day of the year for shopping?
Black Friday.
Yep. You know why they call it Black Friday?
Why?
Because that's their break-even day. Most retail establishments, they don't actually get into the black until the Friday after. Yeah, okay. So a little terminology here. You're either in the red or you're in the black. It's an accounting thing. So if you're in the red, then that means you're losing money, or you have not your income has not exceeded your expenses. And then when your income does exceed your expenses, you are in the black.
Hence Black Friday.
That is why they call it Black Friday, because it is on that Friday. It is because of the sales on that day that most retailers actually reach black and are in the black.
It's a great little fun fact for everybody.
Yep. So there you go. The companies are breaking even. And you should have a break-even point too, and it may be that it's December 31st, or it may be that you've made enough by June 30th to, you've already by June 30th made enough to cover all of your known expenses for the year. Then you're doing great, and that means you're going to be able to save a lot too. And so we now know we have this basis for our knowledge, and then we are going to take all of that information and actually do step three, which is apply it.
Yes, you're going to apply this information.
Okay, again, back to, I just want you to know, remind you, resource tab, website, bullcastpodcast.com. There is an annual budget form on there. There is a monthly budget form on there. Start with your annual budget form, and that'll look a lot like, okay, here is a list of everything that I have for income. Then here is a list of everything that I have that is an expense. And I'm going to add up all of the incomes, and I'm going to subtract all of the expenses. And whatever I have down at the bottom at the end needs to be at least 0, if not a positive number. And you're going to fill in all of the blanks. What is your annual budget? What are your mandatory expenses? And then you're going to determine what discretionary money you have left after your mandatory expenses. So if you end up after your mandatory expenses, you have money left over, then that means you have room for fun stuff, room for the wants, not the needs.
Yes.
Okay. Then you can go through and determine, well, this is how much I want to spend this year on entertainment. I want to travel. I want to spend, and I have this much in discretionary funds that I can spend, and part of it needs to go to travel, so I want to go on.
And hopefully part of it to savings, but we'll get to that in another episode.
You are gonna also obviously put away some to savings. Savings, and in our checklist, savings is listed as discretionary, but really, top
Should be
priority
mandatory.
top priority is putting some money into savings. You want to build up that savings account. Again, we are going to get into that in a whole other episode dedicated to that. It'll be great.
When we're talking about applying this information, again, it's one of those that we want you to understand. The reason we're picking annual first is it's easier to sit there and say, I bring home $30,000 a year. Put that in the income. Mm-hmm. I know that my car insurance is this much, and I pay it, depending on how you pay it, that's, going to go into cash flow, but you can probably figure out total it'll be this much. If you have to pay towards student loans, put it that much. So that's why we start with annual. Mm-hmm. So you can list out how much annually your mortgage would be, all of that, and that's where you would then estimate those variable expenses. But it gives you that big, clear picture and shows you if you're breaking even or where you hit with the income expenses.
Right.
And then it makes it easier for you to then go and break it down into those monthly.
Right. Because, you may have a good idea of okay, this year I'm going to have to spend, I don't know, we spend like $50,000 a year on insurance because we have 3 children that drive. But what is the regular amount that someone spends nowadays for one person? I don't want to sound like an idiot.
I believe it's $1,500 to $1,700 per year.
Okay, so you're budgeting for that much per year. You're budgeting, let's say you're going to go on I haven't been on a vacation in forever either, but let's say it's a $3,000 vacation that you want to budget for. So you've got that discretionary cost, but you've got that insurance that's a mandatory cost. But that's just per year. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what you want to do is when you're planning your monthly budget, part of your monthly budget is going to be go into that escrow account. It's going to be
what was that? I think it's a citation. Escrow. What is that?
Apparently I have gotten my own jargon violation. Okay. So escrow account, what I mean to say is basically savings, but it's technically, escrow would be when you, for instance, if you have a mortgage, you pay a certain amount to the bank for your mortgage payment, but that the bank then takes money from your mortgage payment and sets it aside into a separate sort of accounting where on a monthly basis, and then once a year they use that, what they call that escrow account, mm-hmm. to pay your taxes, your property taxes. Okay, well, basically I'm saying you do the same thing for yourself. You have an escrow account where effectively what you're going to do is you're going to, that once a year you're going to have this major expense of $1,600 for insurance or $3,000 for a trip. So you're going to escrow some of your monthly income into a separate account where you're going to set it aside.
So like make it like a monthly bill.
It's exactly like you're going to budget this much goes to my
escrow account for the large expenses.
Auto insurance escrow for, or my this much goes to my vacation account, my vacation escrow. You could even have multiple different buckets if you wanted to call it different buckets. And we're going to get into buckets. Buckets is probably going to be an episode.
Yeah, definitely going to be an episode. Okay. We're talking about your buckets of your money and how it's all distributed.
It's all distributed. So the idea of escrowing is just basically when you get a paycheck and when you're budgeting out how that paycheck is going to be spent on a monthly basis or on a bi-monthly basis, then part of that money is going to escrow, and it is going to be set aside for you to use later toward those expenses that aren't necessarily weekly or monthly expenses, that the expenses that are only going to have to be paid once every quarter or once every 6 months or once every year. That's an important part of the budget. So you have set out all of your mandatory expenses, and you've set out all of your income, and then you're planning out, okay, this is what I'm going to spend. This is what I'm going to make per month. This is what I'm going to spend per month. And if a particular annual expense isn't going to come up per month, you're going to set something aside for it on a monthly basis, and you're going to lay all of that out. All of that is going to be shown on the budget form, on the monthly budget form that is going to be available on our website. So
we do that because everyone probably has had this where they go, oh crud, I forgot that, I owe $600 this month, and you haven't properly cash flow, that word again, you haven't really budgeted for it, so you don't have the available funds. And that's where I don't want to get too in depth into it, but I want to address it, that's why you understand the nature of your money coming in, because there are options you look at. Do you need to pay your mortgage payment each month in one lump? Can you break it into two? And it's all about how the money's flowing in and making sure you're budgeting your expenses correctly, and even deeper into it that we'll get into another point, but making sure with your credit cards, you set those dates that the money's due to go along with as you have those available funds.
Right. Okay, Katie, let's pause for a word from our sponsor. Turns out, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have any sponsors. But hey, check out Netflix and check out Collierville Nutrition Spot, because we like both of those things. That's a freebie, guys. Let's move on. Step four. We're moving on to step 4. Live it. Love it. She's just a woman.
Breathe it.
Okay, this is the part. This is actually the most important part. People come up with budgets. I think we discussed again. I'm referring back to other episodes, but Katie gave a statistic about how many people out there actually budget. And I said there are probably a lot of people that actually budget. There's just not a lot of people that actually stick to it. So step 4 really is the key, is sticking to it. It's
writing it down. It's doing it in an app, but it's also sharing with your spouse, your significant other.
Communicating.
Or if you need to trust a financial advisor or someone like that to work with you and help hold you accountable. It's knowing yourself, being honest, and figuring out what's going to work. You put in all this work to put this budget together and really dive deep into it. Now let it be a part of you. But again, it's the support bra. It's the floaties. It's part of you and you live it. Do not let it weigh you down and be scared of it.
There are apps out there for stuff like that. For stuff like this, There are things like computer programs like Quicken. You can enter all of your information into an app on your phone or into something like Quicken on your computer. You can write it down on a pad, whatever you're comfortable with, but you've got to make sure that you're keeping track of, I was expecting this payment. Did it come in? Yes. Write it down. I was expecting these expenses. Did I pay them? Yes. What sort of money did I spend on a discretionary expense? Oh, yeah, I've got to write that down. And if you've got multiple people that are spending money off of the same account because you're living as a family, then you've got to communicate with each other and make sure, hey, sweetie, I went to Target and spent $400. We need to make sure that we've got that logged and that we've got it booked for our budget. And what, not just, oh, I went to Target, but what were you buying at Target? Was it groceries? Whatever it was. Somebody is probably, it's just a fact. If you are multiple people living together, one of the people is going to end up being more responsible for keeping track than the other one.
Yeah.
By the very nature of bookkeeping, just one person is going to be more on top of making the entries and keeping track of where all the money is flowing in and out. And so you've got to make sure that if you're not the person that's in charge of keeping track of it, that you're communicating with your spouse or your significant other what your expenditures are so that they can keep track of it. And then holding yourselves accountable.
That's the biggest thing.
I mean, okay, maybe one of my top 5 fears should have been, getting in trouble with my spouse when I go over budget. Yeah. So, don't be afraid to let your partner know, hey, we spent too much this month on this. We need to cut back. You've got to actually, and you've got to hold each other accountable. Hey, we didn't budget for you to spend this much on chocolate this month.
And it doesn't have to be a daily conversation. Yeah. You can set it up and whatever works for you. If, Sunday afternoon or something like that, just kind of, balance your checkbook. Figure out, take a snapshot.
Balance your checkbook?
I know. I'm going to try. I'm going to try.
Fantastic. Look, we already have one convert.
Yes.
Sit down and talk about it. Balance everything out. What did we spend? What came in? Where are we? Are we sticking with our budget? Are we in line? Do we have more discretionary funds than we thought we would? Do we have less? Where did all that money go?
Because remember, you're not just doing this for the moment right now. You are doing it for your future, for that future kid in your life or grandkid or retirement. That's what you've got to look at, that what you do today It's not ever too late. You can put this in place now, and it'll make a huge difference in the future. I think my bullseye, if we're ready for it, you ready?
I'm ready if you are, Katie.
Okay, bullseye. Freedom. That is what this budget is. Freedom! I want you to have that control. I want you to have that financial freedom, that financial peace of mind that you put in the work. It makes a difference, and it will, I promise, it will make a difference. You will understand your living expenses. I wish this for you guys, so I really hope you will implement this in your life.
William Wallace, Braveheart. One of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. And I know, don't get on to me if you're like, oh, it's historically inaccurate. And I don't care. I loved that movie. And not only did I love that movie, but I think, underneath it all, it really was a romance. It really was. It absolutely was a romance. It was all driven by his love of a woman. So, freedom. And anyway, my bullseye is real simple. And it's unfortunately not a William Wallace reference. It's a Starsky and Hutch reference. Do it. That's all. Just do it.
Nike.
We have given you every tool.
On our resources page.
Do it. Do your budget and then stick to it. Well, Katie, that's our closing bell. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a long one. If you stuck through the entire episode, then you should have everything that you need, or should know where to go to find everything that you need to budget. Where would that first place be that you can go? That would be our website. We've mentioned it a few times. It's bullcastpodcast.com. You can also use that site to communicate with us. Send in questions. Soon enough, we're going to start having question and answer sections on our podcasts, and we can't really do that if people aren't asking us questions.
You can also give us topic suggestions.
Yes.
We did have one of those.
If you have something that you'd like to hear us talk about, please send in those topic suggestions. We'd love to hear from you. We're going to start taking things maybe in a more bite-sized direction and really start getting into the nitty-gritty, but we needed to cover this big topic first. I'm still on the closing bell. If you want to reach out to us right now and you just can't wait to email us and hear back from us via email, you can try us on Twitter. Our Twitter is @BullcastPodcast. You can also send us some pics on Instagram. Our Instagram handle is BullcastPodcast. And we have mentioned before that we work at a place called Pickler Wealth Advisors. If you want to find out more about that company and its great team, or find out more about me and Katie, not that you don't already know enough, the website for that company is picklerwealthadvisors.com. That's advisors with an O. That should give you plenty to do until we come around with our next episode. So, until then, I'm Court.
I'm Katie.
And we'll catch you on the flippity flop.